Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 24, Encountering an Assassin at the Hospital. Komaeda Nagito was surprised upon hearing this. Kudo Shinichi really is the epitome of a good person. He politely declined the offer, "Thank you, but I don't need it right now. If my landlord actually kicks me out and I still can't find a place, I'll ask for your help then, Kudo-kun." Kudo Shinichi wasn't offended by the rejection. "Alright, when that time comes, I'll help you ask around." Sigh, Kudo Shinichi thought to himself. This senpai of mine probably had to be independent from a young age, so he's not used to accepting help from others. After chatting a bit more, the conversation ended with Kudo Shinichi reminding Komaeda Nagito to remember his health checkup. Before hanging up, Komaeda Nagito laughed. "Aside from the insurance company, Kudo-kun is the person who's cared the most about me since my parents died. At 14 years old, living with a perfect family, with kind neighbors, Kudo Shinichi. Senpai's life is way worse than I imagined. His neighbors are that cold?" Well, his senpai did mostly live in Tokyo, renting houses, and frequently moving. There wasn't much that could be done. Kudo Shinichi hung up the phone, feeling conflicted, and sighed deeply. His senpai seemed perfectly fine living by himself, but Kudo Shinichi couldn't help but wonder if his concern might come across as condescending. He resolved to be more mindful in the future. While Kudo Shinichi continued pondering the balance between helping others and respecting their independence, Komaeda Nagito's response was much more straightforward. He calmly collected some cash and a spare key from his house and set out for the hospital for his checkup. The weather forecast had mentioned a typhoon in Yokohama for the next couple of days, but the report had reassured that daily activities wouldn't be affected. Everything had seemed normal on his way home yesterday, so after some thought, Komaeda Nagito decided to keep his appointment and just leave the house a little earlier as a precaution. As a result, he arrived at the hospital much earlier than expected. Tei Corporation, being a financial giant in Japan, also had investments in the hospital Komaeda Nagito frequented. As a VIP client, he was greeted by the familiar receptionist as soon as he entered. "Oh, Komaeda-kun, you're a bit early today," the receptionist remarked in surprise. Komaeda Nagito replied casually, "I heard there's a typhoon today, so I left the house earlier than planned. Didn't expect to catch all green lights on the way." The receptionist checked the schedule. "Your first checkup. The doctor is currently treating a patient on another floor. Could you wait upstairs? The room's the same as usual." "Alright." Komaeda Nagito had no objections and made his way to the elevator. On his way, he ran into another familiar doctor. "Back for another checkup, Komaeda-kun?" This doctor specialized in surgery, and he'd treated Komaeda Nagito for various injuries like fractures from car accidents. Japan didn't encourage hopping from doctor to doctor, so this doctor had essentially watched Komaeda Nagito grow up, and they were on familiar terms. After a moment's hesitation, the doctor gave him a warning. "Be careful. The floor you're heading to has some people from the port mafia. They've cleared out the other patients, and the atmosphere's not great. Stay away from them and head straight to your room once you get up there." Komaeda Nagito smiled and thanked him. "Got it, thank you." "No problem. I wouldn't worry about most people, but with your luck." The doctor trailed off, worried that even if Komaeda Nagito stayed still, he might still end up getting hurt. "Just be careful." "But hey, this is a hospital. Worst case scenario, we've got doctors everywhere." Komaeda understood the unspoken concern. "That's true, haha." As a VIP client of Tei Corporation, Komaeda Nagito had access to a special floor reserved for such patients. However, since he wasn't the kind of VIP who demanded constant pampering, he shared the floor with other clients, meaning he didn't have an entire wing to himself with staff constantly at his beck and call. When the elevator stopped at the VIP floor, as soon as the doors opened, Komaeda Nagito was greeted by a shrill, piercing female voice echoing through the hallway. "You actually got her pregnant? What does she have that I don't? She's 5 years older than you. Have you lost your mind? Divorce. I want divorce. You think your business partners are working with you because of you? Half of them only care because of my family. You. Komaeda Nagito. Was this the port mafia? It sounded more like some sort of domestic dispute. Komaeda wasn't particularly interested in such trivial matters, but the next moment, a name reached his ears. Oda Sakanosuke. The port mafia didn't send you here to stand around like an idiot. Komaeda Nagito's eyes lit up, and he quickened his pace, turning the corner just in time to witness the commotion unfolding with 4 people in a chaotic scene. Oda Sakanosuke, no doubt about it. That name belonged to another world's literary figure, but in this world. If he's in the port mafia, that means he's involved in the underworld. Komaeda Nagito thought back to the other literary names he'd encountered: Dazai Osamu, Nakahara Chiya, Oda Sakanosuke. There was also the woman Dazai referred to as Koyone-san, whom Komaeda Nagito suspected was Ozaki Koyo, though Ozaki Koyo was supposed to be male. He wasn't sure yet. But looking at the confirmed literary figures he'd encountered so far, Komaeda Nagito still couldn't understand. Why did all these authors end up joining the mafia? Was this some bizarre law of this world? While pondering this strange phenomenon, Komaeda Nagito approached the group of people in the hallway. One glance was enough to identify Oda Sakanosuke. First, he ruled out the large, sweating, overweight man standing in front of a mature woman who radiated a sense of sophistication. The portly man looked both frustrated and anxious. He was likely the subject of the argument. It was an accident, just like you said. I just thought she looked a lot like my late mother, so I visited her. Then I accidentally got drunk. And she's pregnant at her age. It's not easy for her. An abortion could hurt her. The woman, presumably his wife, wore an expression of utter disgust. Are you insane? She looks like your mother, and you still went through with it. I don't want my child to have such a disgusting half-sibling. The red-haired young man who didn't seem to fit into this situation awkwardly tried to mediate. Everyone here is pregnant. It's better if we sit down and talk. It'll be better for your health. The middle-aged man with the large belly looked desperate. Why would the port mafia send someone like you to handle this? I'm going to file a complaint. I'll definitely file a complaint. Komaeda Nagito. He also wanted to ask, why? Was the head of the port mafia blind? How could they have Oda Sakanosuke handle such a boring job? Yes, even though it was Komaeda Nagito's first time seeing this world's Oda Sakanosuke and he had no idea if the man had any special abilities, his instincts told him immediately that this red-haired young man was no ordinary person. Back in his original world, Komaeda Nagito had gathered intelligence on countless talents because of his admiration for Hope's Peak Academy. This included elite soldiers, expert assassins, and others. Based on posture and demeanor alone, Komaeda Nagito could sense that Oda Sakanosuke wasn't an ordinary person. He was certain of it. As Komaeda Nagito approached the group, the domestic dispute seemed to escalate even further. The wife had started pulling random items out of her bag and throwing them at the man across from her. The sheer volume of items emerging from such a small purse made Komaeda Nagito wonder if the bag was somehow connected to an alternate dimension. And clearly not having any talent for resolving disputes, Oda Sakanosuke remained quietly on the sidelines, suggesting, "This is dangerous. Please stop. Getting too emotional isn't good for the baby." As Komaeda Nagito drew closer, Oda Sakanosuke, who had been largely ignored by the others, suddenly looked up at him. Without warning, he grabbed the woman who had been throwing things and, with impressive agility, pulled the other 3 people toward Komaeda Nagito, tackling him to the ground and shielding him with their bodies. All of a sudden, Komaeda Nagito found himself bearing the weight of 4 adults, 2 of whom were pregnant, and struggled to breathe. He suspected one of his ribs might have cracked. Gasping for air, Komaeda Nagito coughed a few times but didn't have time to ask what was happening before. In the next moment, the large window shattered, and the howling sound of the wind filled the room. A typhoon. Komaeda Nagito suddenly recalled the typhoon warnings he'd seen. But wasn't it supposed to have no impact on daily life? The middle-aged man seemed to share his confusion. A typhoon? Could it really have blown the window out? Did the hospital skimp on construction materials for the glass? Initially shocked and highly suspicious of what Oda Sakanosuke intended to do, but after the window shatters, the two pregnant women clung tightly to the people next to them, refusing to get up, fearing they'd be blown away by the wind. Oda Sakanosuke, who had no choice but to remain on the ground with them, sighed and explained, "The wind isn't strong enough to do this. Something must have been blown into the window to break the glass. But yeah, the quality probably wasn't great. Could you all let go of me?" Komaeda Nagito, struggling to breathe beneath them, added weakly, "Could you also get off of me?" For grown adults, two of them pregnant, had tackled him at full speed, and the feeling was far from pleasant. "Sorry." Oda Sakanosuke skillfully extricated himself and tried to help the others up. "I don't have much experience with pregnant women. I'll go call a doctor." But the two women, now fully aware of the discomfort in their bodies, began clutching their stomachs and crying out in pain, refusing to move. The overweight middle-aged man was pulled to his feet and anxiously hovered around the two women, looking lost. Komaeda Nagito. This was too unlucky. Could it be that this was yet another case of a literary figure's misfortune rubbing off on him? This was just painful. Can they calmly got up sooner? Not one to give up easily, Oda Sakanosuke managed to find an angle and finally pulled Komaeda Nagito out from under the group, apologizing profusely as he did a quick check to make sure Komaeda Nagito was alright. "Sorry about that. They kicked all the doctors off this floor earlier during their argument, but I pressed the emergency button. A doctor should be here soon. Does this hurt?" Komaeda Nagito winced. "It does. And how about here? Bear with it for a second. How about now?" Komaeda Nagito assessed the pain. "It's a bit better." Oda Sakanosuke finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Doesn't seem like anything's broken. You'll just need to rest for a while. We'll have a doctor check on you when they get here." "You seem pretty familiar with this stuff," Komaeda Nagito commented, despite the pain. His focus was no longer on his injuries but on the person helping him. His eyes shone as he looked at Oda Sakanosuke. "Your name's Oda Sakanosuke, right? Were you a doctor before?" Oda Sakanosuke shook his head. "No." Komaeda Nagito was a bit disappointed. "You weren't a doctor, but you're still this skilled? That's such a waste. Why are you doing this boring work? You clearly have the ability to do something much more meaningful. Your boss must really lack vision." Oda Sakanosuke found this boy's fixation a bit odd. After thinking about it for a moment, he responded, "I'm the one who doesn't want a promotion. I'm fine just being an ordinary employee." Komaeda Nagito looked at him in disbelief. "Why?" Oda Sakanosuke didn't answer, instead continuing to check Komaeda for other injuries. After a brief silence, Komaeda Nagito suddenly spoke. "Earlier, before the glass shattered, you seemed to know something was about to happen, didn't you? Under normal circumstances, we all should have been injured by the shards." Oda Sakanosuke looked at him. Komaeda Nagito's green eyes stared intently at the red-haired man, his pupils dilated slightly. "You can see the future." Oda Sakanosuke was genuinely surprised this time. He didn't answer directly, instead saying, "You're very observant. Most people wouldn't notice something like that in such a situation. They'd be too focused on the fact that they were unharmed." But there was one thing this boy had gotten wrong. Oda's ability, flawless, could indeed see danger 5 to 6 seconds into the future. But the future he saw wasn't everyone being injured by the shattered glass. In the future he saw, the others would have been lightly scratched by the glass shards, while this boy was the one who would have been gravely injured by a piece of stone blown in by the typhoon, striking him in the head. Out of everyone, this boy was the unluckiest, fated to be hurt the worst. At that moment, the doctors who had been kicked out earlier finally returned. One of them recognized Komaeda Nagito and was visibly alarmed. Komaeda-kun. Are you alright? Komaeda-kun. Oda Sakanosuke suddenly felt the name sounded familiar. After thinking about it for a moment, he remembered where he had heard it. Ah, Dazai mentioned you. Komaeda Nagito's spirits immediately lifted. You know Dazai-kun? Yes. Komaeda Nagito wasn't at all surprised by this. After all, in the other world, Oda Sakanosuke and Dazai Osamu had been friends. It seemed odd, though, that a low-ranking member of the Port Mafia would know someone like Dazai Osamu, who was on the verge of becoming a mafia executive. That fact alone spoke volumes. Someone with Dazai Osamu's personality wouldn't befriend just anyone. This meant Oda Sakanosuke definitely had something special that caught Dazai Osamu's attention. Just as Komaeda Nagito was about to ask more questions, the doctor who had replaced Oda Sakanosuke began checking him for injuries, and the sudden pain left him unable to speak. Komaeda Nagito hissed in pain. I originally came for a checkup. The doctor was equally exasperated. You came for a checkup and ended up like this? You really are unlucky. Next time, come a bit later so I can be ready for you. The VIP doctors didn't stay on this floor permanently, they had offices downstairs. They only came up when a VIP patient arrived. Today's events had happened at the worst possible time, with Komaeda Nagito's doctor and the others being chased off the floor right when he arrived. Luckily, this doctor came to the same conclusion as Oda Sakanosuke, nothing serious. Walk around a bit and see how you feel. We'll do a scan later to make sure. Komaeda Nagito smiled wryly as he got to his feet. The two pregnant women were now surrounded by a group of doctors and nurses, while the middle-aged man was left awkwardly pacing around them. Oda Sakanosuke didn't want to cause more trouble, so he helped Komaeda Nagito walk around the hallway to test his movement. Looking at the silent Oda Sakanosuke, Komaeda Nagito asked, Why aren't you over there? Isn't that your job? I don't think I'm suited for that kind of work, Oda Sakanosuke replied calmly. They barely even noticed you were there. Are you used to downplaying your presence? Ah. Oda Sakanosuke seemed to realize the issue for the first time. That's a habit from my time as an assassin. Komaeda Nagito was taken aback. He hadn't expected such a straightforward answer. Oda Sakanosuke had figured there was no point in hiding it. For various reasons, he might as well be upfront about it. The idea that Oda Sakanosuke had once been an assassin was one of the possibilities Komaeda Nagito had considered. His movements and habits were too different from normal people, and even from the regular members of the Port Mafia that Komaeda Nagito had observed. But why would a former assassin be handling something as mundane as resolving a family dispute between a major business partner and his wife? Komaeda Nagito couldn't resist asking, Did you switch careers because you weren't good at it? No. Oda Sakanosuke looked at Komaeda Nagito, sensing that there was no harm in answering honestly. I stopped because I didn't want to kill anymore. Komaeda Nagito immediately understood. I see, that's why you're stuck doing this kind of work in the Port Mafia. The Port Mafia was still the Mafia, after all. If you weren't willing to kill, your career advancement would definitely hit a ceiling. So are you planning to stay like this forever? Komaeda Nagito asked, disappointed. Don't you have anything else you want to do, any other job you want? Though Oda Sakanosuke didn't respond, Komaeda Nagito had already guessed. It seemed likely that Oda Sakanosuke's ability was foresight, and yet, despite possessing such a powerful ability, he was content to remain a low-ranking member of the Port Mafia. What a waste of potential, completely unworthy of expectation. Oda Sakanosuke didn't get angry at Komaeda Nagito's slightly disrespectful tone, he was more curious than anything. This should be our first time meeting, right? Why are you so concerned about my job? What do you think I should be doing instead? Komaeda Nagito was momentarily at a loss for words. He wasn't familiar with the Oda Sakanosuke of this world, and since the man clearly didn't want to continue being an assassin, Komaeda Nagito didn't have any concrete advice to offer. In the original world, Komaeda Nagito's answer would have been simple: Oda Sakanosuke should write novels. But in this world, it wasn't even clear if Oda Sakanosuke had finished school, and he might not have any interest in becoming a novelist. However, based on Komaeda Nagito's observations over the past few days, certain writers from the previous world, like Conan Doyle, still wrote Sherlock Holmes, and even Natsume Soseki was inexplicably still alive and publishing novels. So, perhaps. Especially since Komaeda Nagito noticed a book sticking out of Oda Sakanosuke's coat pocket, it looked like literary fiction, not light reading. Holding on to a sliver of hope, he asked, "Are you interested in writing novels?" Oda Sakanosuke paused, stopping Komaeda Nagito as well. They turned to look at each other. For the first time, a ripple of emotion appeared in Oda Sakanosuke's normally calm eyes. "Did Dazai tell you that?" "No, I just thought that since you enjoy reading, maybe you could try writing something yourself. Who knows? You might have a talent for it." Oda Sakanosuke followed Komaeda Nagito's gaze to his coat pocket, and suddenly understood. "I do enjoy reading." He thought for a moment and then, speaking to the boy he had only just met, he added, "I've also considered writing a novel. But right now, I need to support my family, and the money from working with the port mafia is quicker." Komaeda Nagito hadn't expected such a pleasant surprise. If Oda Sakanosuke were willing to leave behind his dead-end job to become a novelist, wouldn't that be a way to indirectly encourage the blossoming of hope? Immediately, Komaeda Nagito said, "That doesn't have to be a conflict. You could use your free time after work to write." "No." Oda Sakanosuke didn't know why he was explaining so much to this person. It was probably because the other party had an attitude like, "If you don't go write novels, it would truly be a waste, you're bound to succeed," which made him curious about where this strange young man's confidence in him was coming from. "I mainly want to finish a novel I read that had no ending, but I've been thinking about it for a long time and can't come up with a good plot. It's hard to start." Komaeda Nagito sighed deeply. "Oda-san, would you like me to recommend some books about writing for you? I've already read quite a few." "Then you should know this." With a mix of exasperation and mild scorn in his tone, Komaeda Nagito said, "If you want to become a novelist, just thinking about it isn't enough. You at least need to start by picking up a pen and writing something down." Chapter 24 End.